Hello everyone, and welcome to the December edition of the Farmer Supply Association Agriculture Report. I'm Randy Klepechka, agronomist with Farmer Supply Association. Well, I've got to give another harvest update again this month. I keep hoping it'll be my last one, but believe it or not, there's still some crops in the field. We're still not finished. Still some decent amount of soybeans in the field, and even still some rice in the field. So it's, kind of unheard of for it to go this late. I mean, we've seen it before, but not very often. Again, just, the rain, the consistent rainy period that we've been in over really much of the fall. I keep records of that. During November, we had 16 days with some rainfall in them. Especially with soybeans, that multiplies because, it just because it doesn't rain one day, that doesn't mean you can cut, because you've got, high moisture beans, wet pods, wet beans within the pod. So 12 days in September, 13 in October, I think, and 16 in November. So just very difficult to get any kind of stretch of harvest days. You can get one here and one there, maybe a couple here and there, but been very difficult. But our farmers are still battling. Got a lot of guys been helping each other out and trying to get this thing finished up. And hopefully by the time I talk to you next time, certainly it'll be finished up. But it's been a long battle, but it's getting done. While harvest isn't complete, planning for 2019 is ongoing. Last month, I talked about rice varieties and hybrids, some of the characteristics of them, and some things to think about when you're selecting varieties and hybrids. This month, let's turn to our other major crop, soybeans, and talk about varieties with them, and talk about some selection things we need to consider. Soybean variety selection is really based, you got to start with your herbicide technology, the herbicide technology that you need in your crop. So right now that's somewhat complicated due to the dicamba regulations being held up at this time. We've talked about this for 2 or 3 years. I think in October it was announced that the federal label for the dicamba formulations for soybeans had been extended for a couple of more years. And they did make some changes to the label. You do have to be a certified applicator, and I don't know that that's been defined yet what that is. You have to be a certified applicator to apply them. They've changed up the dates you can apply the dicamba formulations on the federal label. They've also changed some of the buffers, the distance you need to be from susceptible crops and things like that to apply these dicamba formulations. So that's the federal label. So the next question for us here is, what's Arkansas going to do? A proposal passed the pesticide committee back earlier, and we're taping today on December the 6th, and I think there's a full plant board meeting to discuss this new proposal today. If it goes through them, there'll be a public comment period where anyone can make comments, yay or nay or whatever, about this before everything is finalized. So that's kind of where we're at right now in early December, just seeing what they're going to do. You might be asking, especially some of you that may not be directly involved in this, is why all the talk about dicamba? Well, there's certainly positive things, there's negative things to think about, just like with anything. Positive with the extender dicamba soybeans, the yield potential of a lot of these varieties of the dicamba beans is outstanding. Almost, you might say, a new level of yield potential with some of these varieties that we've seen, and I've had some tests last couple of years that have shown that as well. It is another mode of action of herbicides, and you've heard me talk about herbicide resistance. I've talked about that before many times on these programs. You need to be changing up your modes of action every time you plant a crop in a field to try to avoid resistance being built up. Well, the dicamba is a Group 4 herbicide. It's a new mode of action, so if we can mix that up with Liberty or whatever we've been using before, Roundup, whatever, that'll help us maybe stave off resistance of what we got. So that's a very important part of it. On the negative side, we got to be able to avoid getting the dicamba on susceptible crops, whether it be non-dicamba soybeans, whether it be fruits, vegetables, ornamentals, anything like that. Certainly dicamba can cause a serious injury to these other crops. So, we've got the positives, we've got the negatives there. We've got guys that are wanting to be able to plant the extend beans, and we've got guys wondering if they need to plant extend beans just kind of as a self-defense mechanism. So that's why all the talk about dicamba beans, and that's why it's so important we know the regulations, what the regulations are going to be before we make decisions. There have been some new findings in research over the last year or so that may help in the future with this. They've learned that mixing the dicamba with glyphosate can increase the volatility. So if we can avoid those formulations or mixing the dicamba with the glyphosate, we can lessen this volatility aspect. We can mix something like Select or generic Select with the dicamba and lessen the volatility and still take care of our grasses and things like that. They've also looked at the new see and spray technology, where the sprayer can actually just spray only the weeds and not spray everything, and that would in most cases lessen the amount of dicamba going out and would therefore probably lessen volatility. There's also a new dicamba formulation being worked on, and this one is a lot less volatile, so it's not something that's coming out this year or anything like that, but it is something that is in the works. So there are some things going on that would help us in this dicamba issue of getting on susceptible crops and things like that, would keep it where it needs to be a lot better. So those are some things that are being looked at. So again, that's kind of where we're at with the dicamba. There are a lot of obviously some other good herbicide technologies out there that we've been using, and we can certainly rely on them. Liberty Link has kind of been the standard, especially where pigweeds are an issue. Ever since we have resistance really to Roundup or glyphosate, the Liberty Link has kind of taken over in a lot of these heavy pigweed situations. Has done an outstanding job for us. Still no resistance has been documented to Liberty herbicide with pigweed, so that's a good thing. But again, we'd like to kind of stave that off a little bit. But we've still got the Liberty to depend on with pigweed control, and the varieties, the Liberty Link varieties are getting better. We're getting better yielding Liberty Link varieties out there, so that's certainly going to help us. We've still got the Roundup Ready technology. Of course, pretty much all of our pigweeds are certainly resistant to Roundup, so that's certainly an issue. We can't rely on the Roundup Ready technology if we have a lot of pigweed situations. So that kind of limits the Roundup Ready use. Conventional is pretty much the same thing. We have some good conventional varieties out there as well, including some public varieties. We can certainly save money on seed with those kinds of varieties, but again, in our area we've got so many pigweed infested fields that really that's tough to be able to use again the Roundup Ready or the conventional. But there's some other options we have out there when looking for varieties if we don't have a heavy pigweed situation. The Enlist technology, we're going to get that pretty soon, hopefully. So there's some countries that have not accepted this technology yet, and we've got to have all of that approved before we can start growing them, full scale, because they've got to be able to be exported to these other countries, and they haven't approved them yet in a lot of cases. So we've got to have that. Again, the list is the 2,4-D technology. The formulation they've got, the 2,4-D choline, is very low volatility, and it's something that seems to not get around and damage other crops very, very badly. So again, we've got to get some better varieties in that Enlist technology, and that'll be another option for us as far as herbicide technology goes. So you see, we've got a lot of different possibilities there as far as the the herbicide technologies, and just got to see where we're going with this dicamba regulations, and then that'll help make decisions, and we can go from there. So hopefully we'll know more in the next month or so, and then until then, this has been Randy Klepechka with your Farmer Supply Association Agriculture Report for December.